Hey guys, tonight you wake up in Tang Dynasty China and your hands are already shaking. The wine jar beside your bed is empty again. We'll get to why that empty jar just signed your death warrant. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights because we're stepping into 8th century Chang'an, where your drinking problem isn't just ruining your liver. It's about to destroy your entire bloodline. You're lying on a thin bamboo mat in what used to be your family's compound. The wooden walls around you belong to someone else now. You sold them last month for wine money. Your wife left 3 weeks ago, taking the children and whatever dignity you had remaining. The neighbors don't look at you anymore when you stumble past their gates. Your mouth tastes like fermented rice and regret. There's a persistent ache behind your eyes that wine used to fix, but now just makes worse. Your hands won't stop trembling, and you know exactly what that means. You need more wine, but the copper coins under your sleeping mat disappeared sometime during the night. Again, the rooster in the courtyard next door starts crowing, which means it's time to pretend you're looking for work. You push yourself upright and immediately regret it. The world tilts sideways for a moment, and you have to grip the wall to keep from falling over. Your stomach churns with nothing but bile and yesterday's wine. Let's be clear about something. In Tang Dynasty China, alcoholism isn't a disease requiring treatment and understanding. It's a moral failing that reflects poorly on your ancestors, your descendants, and the cosmic order itself. Your drinking problem isn't just your problem. It's everyone's problem, and they're going to make sure you know it. You stumble outside into the morning light, squinting against the sun that feels like needles in your brain. The streets of Chang'an are already busy with people who have their lives together. Merchants setting up their stalls, scholars heading to the Imperial Academy, farmers bringing vegetables to market. Normal people doing normal things while you stand there swaying slightly, trying to remember where you were supposed to be today. A group of children runs past you, laughing and chasing each other with wooden swords. One of them looks back and whispers something to his friends. They all turn to stare at you for a moment before running away, giggling. You recognize one of them, your nephew. He pretends not to see you. The magistrate's office isn't far from here, but you've been avoiding it for weeks. There are documents waiting for you there, official papers with red seals that will change everything. Your brother filed a formal complaint against you last month, claiming you're bringing shame to the family name. In Imperial China, that's not just an insult. It's grounds for legal action. You know you should go to the magistrate's office and face whatever's waiting there, but your feet carry you toward the wine shops in the Eastern District instead. It's not really a choice anymore. Your body decides these things for you now, and your body wants wine more than it wants dignity or family or a future. The first wine shop you try won't serve you. The owner takes one look at your unwashed clothes and shaking hands and shakes his head. He's seen you before, probably remembers the last time you promised to pay tomorrow. There's no anger in his refusal, just tired resignation. You're a regular disappointment now, as predictable as the sunrise. The second shop owner is more sympathetic, or maybe just more desperate for customers. He pours you a small cup of rice wine in exchange for your shoes. They're not good shoes, just cloth slippers with holes near the toes, but they're something. You drink the wine too quickly and ask for more. He wants your outer robe now. Think again if you believe this is just about personal choices and willpower. In Tang Dynasty China, alcoholism is viewed through the lens of Confucian philosophy, which means your drinking reflects a fundamental disorder in your character, your family, and your place in society. You're not just failing yourself. You're failing the cosmic order that keeps the empire stable. Your outer robe was the last good piece of clothing you owned. It belonged to your father, and his father before him. The silk is faded now, stained with wine and sweat, but it still bears the family crest near the collar. A small embroidered symbol that represents 3 generations of minor government officials who managed to avoid complete disgrace. You hand over the robe and receive another cup of wine. This one goes down easier, quieting the trembling in your hands for a few precious minutes. The wine shop owner folds your father's robe carefully and places it on a shelf behind the counter. He's not cruel about it, just practical. He'll sell it to someone else tomorrow, probably for enough to buy several jars of wine. The temporary relief doesn't last long. Within an hour, the shaking is back, along with the nausea and the cold sweats that make you feel like you're dying from the inside out. You need more wine, but you have nothing left to trade. Nothing except information. The magistrate's office is busier now, filled with people conducting the daily business of imperial bureaucracy. Tax collectors, merchants seeking permits, families filing complaints against neighbors who let their pigs wander into other people's gardens. Normal disputes between normal people who haven't traded their family robes for wine. You approach the clerk's desk on unsteady legs, trying to look more composed than you feel. The clerk recognizes you immediately. Your brother's complaint isn't the only paperwork with your name on it. There are also records of your debts, your wife's petition for divorce, and several incidents involving public drunkenness that the neighborhood watch reported. The clerk slides a piece of paper across the desk toward you. It's written in formal bureaucratic language, but the meaning is clear enough. Your brother is requesting that the family formally disown you. In Imperial China, this isn't just cutting ties. It's erasing you from the family genealogy, removing your name from ancestor tablets, and ensuring that your children will grow up with no legal connection to their father's bloodline. But there's another option. The imperial government is always looking for informants, people willing to report on their neighbors' activities in exchange for small payments. Taxes evaded, regulations ignored, seditious conversations overheard in wine shops. The kind of information that keeps the empire running smoothly, and the emperor's officials employed. You've heard enough conversations in wine shops over the past few months to fill several reports. Merchants complaining about new taxes, scholars questioning government policies, even a few monks who seemed surprisingly well informed about military movements near the frontier. Information that might be worth something to the right people. The clerk explains the arrangement in a voice that suggests he's had this conversation before. Monthly payments, just enough to keep you in wine and basic food. All you have to do is listen, remember, and report back. Your neighbors, your drinking companions, anyone who says things the government might want to know about. Congratulations, you've just discovered the bottom rung of Imperial China's surveillance state. A network of alcoholics, debtors, and social outcasts who trade gossip for survival. Welcome to a job where your moral failures are actually qualifications, and your drinking problem becomes a cover for government work. The first assignment is simple enough. There's a wine shop in the Western District where scholars gather to drink and complain about the latest imperial edicts. The owner is suspected of watering down his wine and avoiding taxes. But what the government really wants to know about are the conversations. Who says what about whom, and whether any of it crosses the line from harmless griping into actual sedition. You leave the magistrate's office with a few copper coins and a sick feeling that has nothing to do with wine withdrawal. The coins are enough for a jar of decent rice wine, enough to stop the shaking and clear your head for a few hours. But they come with strings attached, invisible chains that connect you to a system you never intended to join. The wine shop in the Western District is busier than the one where you traded your father's robe. Scholars in clean robes sit at low tables, discussing poetry and politics over cups of wine that smell better than anything you've been able to afford lately. They're educated men with government positions, family connections, and futures that don't depend on selling information to imperial clerks. You order wine and find a table close enough to overhear conversations, but far enough away to avoid drawing attention. The wine is better than you expected, smooth and warming, without the harsh bite of the cheap stuff you've been drinking. For a moment, you almost feel human again. The scholars at the next table are discussing the latest tax increases. Nothing treasonous, just the kind of complaints you'd expect from people who actually pay taxes. One of them mentions a friend who's considering moving his family to a different prefecture where the local magistrate is less enthusiastic about collecting revenue. Another talks about bribing a clerk to reduce his assessment. None of this feels particularly dangerous, but you listen anyway. Your hands are steady now, your mind clear enough to follow the conversation and remember details. Names, dates, specific amounts mentioned in passing. The kind of information that might interest someone in the magistrate's office, even if it's not exactly earth-shattering intelligence. A monk joins the scholar's table, settling his robes carefully before accepting a cup of wine. He's older than the others, with the kind of confident bearing that suggests he's used to being listened to. The conversation shifts to more philosophical topics. The nature of good governance, the responsibilities of rulers to their subjects, a proper balance between imperial authority and local autonomy. Still nothing that sounds like sedition, but the monk's comments are more pointed than the scholars. He speaks about emperors who lost the mandate of heaven through excessive taxation and moral corruption. Historical examples, carefully chosen to draw parallels without making direct accusations. The kind of sophisticated criticism that educated people use when they want to express dangerous ideas safely. You drink slowly, making your wine last while you listen. The monk mentions specific policies, recent decisions that he describes as short-sighted or harmful to the common people. He's careful with his words, but the meaning underneath is clear enough. He thinks the current emperor is making mistakes that could have serious consequences. The scholars nod along, contributing their own historical examples and philosophical observations. None of them say anything directly critical of the emperor or his policies, but the cumulative effect is unmistakably subversive. They're using scholarship and history to express ideas that would be dangerous if stated more directly. By the time you finish your wine, you have enough material for a detailed report. Names, faces, specific conversations that toe the line between legitimate scholarly discussion and political criticism. Information that might interest the magistrate's office, especially if they're looking for reasons to investigate certain scholars or monks. You leave the wine shop feeling worse than when you arrived, despite the wine in your system. The scholars are still talking, still discussing ideas that matter to them, unaware that their words are being collected and measured against imperial standards of loyalty. You're not just a drunk anymore. You're a drunk with responsibilities. The walk back to your sleeping place takes you through neighborhoods where you used to live when you had a family and a future. The houses look the same, but everything feels different now. You're looking at them through the eyes of an informant, noticing details that might be worth reporting. Who visits whom? Which families seem to have more money than their official positions would suggest? Where people gather to talk about things that might interest the government. Your old house is dark when you pass it. Your wife and children moved out weeks ago, but seeing the empty windows still feels like a punch in the chest. The neighbor's dog, a small brown mongrel with persistent opinions about strangers, starts barking as soon as it sees you. It remembers you, but it doesn't seem pleased about it. You try to sleep on your bamboo mat, but your mind won't settle. The wine has worn off enough to let the guilt creep back in, along with the physical discomfort that means you'll need more wine tomorrow. And tomorrow, you'll need more information to trade for the coins that buy the wine. A cycle that's already become as automatic as breathing. The brown dog from next door has followed you home, apparently deciding that you're worth investigating further. It sits outside your door, not quite begging, but making it clear that it expects something. Food, attention, or maybe just acknowledgement from someone who's clearly fallen as far as a person can fall without actually dying. You don't have any food to share, but you let the dog into your small room anyway. It curls up in the corner, watching you with the kind of non-judgmental attention that you haven't received from a human in months. For a moment, you remember what it felt like to have a family, to be responsible for something other than gathering gossip for imperial clerks. Morning comes with the familiar trembling and nausea, but also with the brown dog licking your face. It's not the worst way to wake up, though it's not particularly dignified either. The dog seems to think you belong to it now, which is probably the most stable relationship you've had since your wife left. The magistrate's office expects a report today, which means you need to turn yesterday's conversations into the kind of formal language that bureaucrats prefer. Names, dates, specific statements, and your assessment of whether any of it represents a genuine threat to imperial authority. The kind of writing you used to do when you had a government position yourself, before the drinking made you unreliable. You write carefully, translating the scholar's philosophical discussions into bureaucratic concerns. The monk's historical examples become potential signs of seditious thinking. The complaints about taxes become evidence of organized resistance to imperial policy. It's not exactly lying, but it's not exactly truth either. It's the kind of creative interpretation that keeps informants useful and wine jars full. The clerk reads your report with professional interest, making small notes in the margins. He seems satisfied with the level of detail, the specific names and locations you've provided. This is exactly the kind of information the government wants, evidence that its surveillance network is functioning properly and producing useful intelligence. Your payment is the same as yesterday, a few copper coins that represent the precise value of your neighbor's privacy. Enough for wine and basic food, but not enough to restore any dignity or self-respect. Just enough to keep you functional and desperate, exactly where the system needs you to be. The brown dog is waiting outside the magistrate's office when you emerge, tail wagging as if you've accomplished something worthy of celebration. It follows you to the wine shop, sits patiently while you drink, and walks with you through the neighborhoods where you used to belong. A loyal companion for someone who's forgotten how to be worthy of loyalty. Let's talk about what happens to alcoholics in Imperial China when they can't find ways to make themselves useful to the government. The records show a variety of fates, none of them particularly pleasant. Some die of exposure during winter months, too drunk to seek proper shelter. Others succumb to the various diseases that flourish in unsanitary conditions. A few simply disappear, their names removed from official records as if they never existed. But some, like you, find ways to make their failures valuable to the system. Your drinking problem becomes a cover for surveillance work. Your social isolation makes you trustworthy to other outcasts, who might not confide in someone with connections to respectable society. Your desperate need for wine ensures loyalty to whoever provides the means to obtain it. The wine shop in the Western District has become your regular assignment, which means you're developing relationships with the scholars and monks who gather there. They're beginning to recognize you as a harmless drunk who listens more than he talks, exactly the kind of person who becomes invisible in educated company. Today's conversation centers on a new imperial edict requiring additional documentation for trade licenses. The scholars are discussing workarounds, ways to avoid the new requirements or minimize their impact. One mentions a clerk who's willing to expedite applications for the right consideration. Another knows a merchant who's decided to operate without proper licenses rather than deal with the bureaucratic complications. The monk contributes observations about historical precedents, times when excessive regulation led to widespread non-compliance and eventual policy reversals. He's more direct today, perhaps because he's becoming comfortable with his audience. He describes the current emperor's policies as potentially destabilizing, likely to create more problems than they solve. You drink slowly and listen carefully, mentally composing tomorrow's report. The scholar's discussion of avoiding regulations could be framed as organized resistance to imperial authority. The monk's historical analysis could be presented as disguised criticism of current policies. Information that might prompt investigations, interviews, or closer surveillance of people who consider themselves safely invisible. The brown dog waits outside the wine shop, somehow understanding that this is work time. When you emerge, it falls into step beside you, providing a kind of companionship that doesn't require explanations or apologies. Together, you walk through Chang'an's evening streets, an unlikely pair of survivors in a system that has little patience for failure. Your old neighborhood feels different now that you're seeing it through an informant's eyes. You notice things that never mattered before. Which families receive visitors after dark? Which houses show signs of unusual prosperity? Which neighbors seem to have conversations that stop abruptly when others approach? Information that might be worth something to people who make decisions about other people's lives. The house where your family used to live is still dark, but there are signs that someone new might be moving in soon. Fresh repairs to the gate, cleaned windows, swept walkways. Life moving forward without you, as if the years you spent there were just a temporary interruption in the building's real purpose. You settle onto your bamboo mat with the brown dog curled against your side, providing warmth and a heartbeat that isn't your own. Tomorrow, there will be more wine, more conversations to overhear, more reports to write in exchange for survival. Tonight, there's just the simple comfort of not being completely alone, even if your only companion is a mongrel dog that someone else probably misses. Sleep comes easier with wine in your system and the dog's steady breathing beside you. Your dreams are confused mixtures of memory and guilt, conversations you've overheard, blending with voices from your past. Your wife explaining why she has to leave. Your children asking why their father smells like wine all the time. Your brother's formal, careful language as he files papers to erase you from the family history. But also new voices now. The scholars discussing philosophy and politics. The monk's measured criticism of imperial policies. The wine shop owner counting coins while he folds your father's robe. The magistrate's clerk making notes in the margins of your reports. A growing chorus of people whose lives you're now connected to in ways they don't understand. The brown dog wakes you by stepping on your chest, apparently deciding that sunrise means breakfast time. Your mouth tastes like old wine and regret, but the shaking in your hands is manageable today. The dog looks at you expectantly, as if you might have developed the ability to produce food overnight. You stumble outside to relieve yourself behind the building, and the dog follows, maintaining the kind of companionship that doesn't require dignity from either party. The morning air is cold against your skin, and you realize you're wearing the same clothes you've worn for the past week. The thin underrobe that used to be white is now a grayish-brown, stained with wine and sweat and the general griminess of someone who's stopped caring about appearances. The magistrate's office doesn't open for another hour, which gives you time to visit the public well and attempt something resembling personal hygiene. The water is shockingly cold, but it helps clear your head and wash away some of the wine smell that clings to your skin. The brown dog laps at the water puddles around the well base, apparently content with whatever it can find. A woman washing vegetables at the well glances at you with the kind of careful neutrality that people use when they're trying not to see something unpleasant. She recognizes you, probably remembers when you had a family and clean clothes and a purpose beyond gathering gossip for government clerks. Now you're just another reminder that respectable lives can collapse faster than anyone wants to believe. You try to smooth your hair with wet hands, but there's only so much improvement possible without soap or clean clothes or a reason to care what you look like. The brown dog seems satisfied with your appearance, which is probably the only opinion that matters at this point. The walk to the magistrate's office takes you past the building where you used to work, back when you had a position in the imperial bureaucracy. Nothing important, just a minor clerical job processing tax documents and maintaining records. But it was steady work with regular pay, enough to support a family and maintain the kind of respectability that your ancestors would have recognized. Your former supervisor is arriving for work as you pass, stepping down from a sedan chair carried by two servants. He sees you watching and nods politely, the way officials acknowledge beggars when they want to demonstrate their compassion without actually engaging. No recognition in his eyes, no memory of the reliable clerk who used to arrive early and stay late to ensure all documents were properly filed. The brown dog growls softly at the sedan chair bearers, apparently sensing your discomfort with the encounter. It's a small gesture of loyalty, meaningless but somehow comforting. At least someone is willing to take your side, even if that someone has fleas and questionable judgment about food sources. The magistrate's office is busier than usual today, filled with people conducting various forms of official business. Property disputes, marriage contracts, complaints about neighbors whose chickens keep destroying carefully tended gardens. The mundane conflicts that keep local government functioning and clerks employed. You wait your turn, listening to other people's problems and wondering how many of them might be worth including in future reports. The merchant arguing about disputed boundaries might be hiding assets to avoid taxes. The widow seeking permission to remarry could be circumventing regulations about inheritance. Everyone has secrets that might interest someone in the imperial hierarchy. The clerk who handles your reports seems tired today, processing paperwork with the mechanical efficiency of someone who's seen too many similar documents. He reads your latest submission without much interest, making the usual marginal notes before sliding payment across the desk. The same amount as always, precisely calculated to maintain your dependence without providing any real financial stability. But today, there's something additional, a new assignment, more complex than simply listening to conversations in wine shops. The government wants information about a specific individual, a merchant who's suspected of avoiding import duties on goods brought from the frontier provinces, someone who needs to be watched more closely than casual surveillance can provide. The merchant's name is Zhao Wei, and he operates several businesses in Chang'an's commercial district. Silk imports, tea trading, some involvement in the horse markets that supply the imperial cavalry. Prosperous enough to attract government attention, successful enough to afford the kind of discretion that makes investigation difficult. Your job is to become a customer, someone who frequents his establishments and observes his business practices. Look for signs of unreported income, undocumented inventory, dealings with suppliers who might not appear on official records. The kind of detailed surveillance that requires more than overhearing casual conversations. The advance payment is larger than usual, enough for decent clothes and several days' worth of wine. Enough to make you look like someone who might actually have business with a prosperous merchant, rather than a desperate trunk trading gossip for survival. The clerk explains that appearances matter for this assignment, that you'll need to blend in with Zhao Wei's regular customers. You leave the magistrate's office with more money than you've seen in months, but also with a growing sense that you're moving deeper into something you might not be able to escape. The brown dog seems to sense your unease, pressing closer to your leg as you walk through the commercial district toward Zhu Wei's primary establishment. The silk shop is larger than you expected, with displays of fine fabrics arranged to catch the morning light. Customers browse through bolts of silk in various colors and patterns, examining quality and negotiating prices with assistants who know their business. This is serious commerce, the kind of trade that helps maintain the empire's prosperity and funds the imperial bureaucracy. Zhao Wei himself is a middle-aged man with the confident bearing of someone who succeeded in a difficult business. He greets customers personally, demonstrating his knowledge of different silk types and their origins. His clothes are well made, but not ostentatious, expensive enough to signal success without attracting the wrong kind of government attention. You approach one of the assistants and inquire about silk suitable for formal robes, trying to sound like someone who might actually be able to afford such purchases. The assistant is polite, but clearly assessing your appearance, noting the worn clothes and general dishevelment that marks you as probably not a serious customer. Still, commerce requires courtesy, and the assistant shows you several options in the middle price range. Nothing too expensive, but respectable fabrics that might be appropriate for someone with modest means and decent prospects. You examine the silk carefully, trying to appear knowledgeable while actually learning what you can about the shop's operations. The inventory is impressive, representing trade connections that span the empire and beyond. Silks from the southern provinces, patterns that suggest Central Asian influences, colors that require expensive dyes imported from distant regions. The kind of diverse stock that suggests either exceptional trade, networks, or possibly some unofficial arrangements that bypass normal customs procedures. Zhao Wei approaches while you're examining a bolt of dark blue silk, introducing himself with the practiced charm of a successful merchant. He's clearly curious about a new customer, someone he doesn't recognize, but who seems to have serious interest in his merchandise. His questions are casual but probing, designed to determine your background and financial capacity. You explain that you recently arrived in Chang'an, looking to establish yourself in business and needing appropriate clothing for meetings with potential partners. Not entirely untrue, since your current assignment does involve establishing relationships for business purposes. Zhao Wei nods approvingly, recognizing someone who understands the importance of proper presentation. The conversation continues for several minutes, covering topics that allow you to gather information while appearing to be a legitimate customer. Zhao Wei mentions recent shipments from the frontier provinces, challenges with transportation during the winter months, relationships with suppliers who specialize in particular types of silk, details that might be significant when compared against official trade records. You purchase a small piece of silk, claiming you need to consult with a tailor about measurements before making larger purchases. The transaction establishes you as a real customer, while providing an excuse to return later for additional conversations. Zhao Wei seems satisfied with the interaction, treating you as someone worth cultivating for future business. The brown dog is waiting outside the silk shop, having somehow understood that it shouldn't follow you inside. It falls into step beside you as you walk away, providing the kind of loyal companionship that you haven't experienced from humans in months. Together, you head toward a wine shop where you can think about what you've learned and plan your next approach. The wine tastes better when you can afford the decent stuff, smooth and warming without the harsh bite that characterizes cheaper alternatives. You sit at a corner table and try to organize your observations into the kind of information that might interest Imperial investigators. Zhao Wei's confident demeanor, his extensive inventory, his casual mentions of frontier trade connections. Nothing obviously illegal yet, but several details that warrant further investigation. The variety of his stock suggests trade relationships that might not all be properly documented. His knowledge of transportation challenges implies direct involvement in shipping arrangements that could bypass normal inspection procedures. The kind of operational awareness that comes from hands-on management of potentially questionable activities. The brown dog settles under your table, apparently content to wait while you drink and think. Occasionally, it emerges to investigate dropped food or interesting smells, but it always returns to your feet, maintaining the kind of faithful presence that you've forgotten how to deserve. Your thoughts drift to your wife and children, wondering where they're living now, and whether they ever think about the husband and father who traded their family's stability for wine. Your son would be old enough now to understand why his mother left, old enough to feel ashamed of having a father who became an informant for the imperial government. But dwelling on such thoughts leads nowhere useful, and you have work to do. Tomorrow you'll return to Zhao Wei's shop, perhaps bringing fabric samples to compare against different options. Build the relationship gradually. Establish yourself as someone who might become a regular customer worth trusting with information about business practices. The afternoon passes slowly, giving you time to observe the commercial district and identify other businesses that might be connected to Zhao Wei's operations. A tea merchant 2 streets away, a warehouse that seems to handle goods from multiple traders, a money changer who specializes in currencies from the frontier provinces. Pieces of a commercial network that might reveal interesting patterns when examined closely. Evening brings cooler air and the familiar need for more wine, but also a growing sense that this assignment might be more complex than simple surveillance. Zhao Wei appears to be a successful merchant with extensive trade connections, exactly the kind of person who might have access to information that goes beyond simple customs violations. You return to your sleeping place with the brown dog, both of you settling onto the bamboo mat that serves as your bed. The dog curls against your side, providing warmth and companionship that doesn't require explanations or apologies. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new conversations to navigate, while gathering information for people who make decisions about other people's lives. Sleep comes easier tonight, helped by better wine and the satisfaction of completing the first day of a more significant assignment. Your dreams are less troubled than usual, filled with images of silk and commerce rather than the usual mixture of guilt and regret. For the first time in months, you feel like you might be useful for something beyond simply existing. Morning arrives with the brown dog licking your face, apparently deciding that sunrise means time to begin the day's activities. Your hands are steadier than usual, and the familiar nausea is manageable. The additional money from your new assignment has allowed you to drink better wine, which seems to agree with your system more than the harsh alternatives you've been consuming. You wash at the public well again, trying to maintain the kind of appearance that won't draw unwanted attention in Zhao Wei's establishment. The brown dog drinks from the water puddles, while you attempt to smooth your hair and clean your face. It's not much improvement, but it's enough to avoid looking like someone who sleeps in doorways. The commercial district is busy in the morning, with merchants opening their shops and customers beginning their daily rounds. You observe the activity for a while, noting patterns of movement and identifying regular customers who might provide opportunities for casual conversation about various traders' reputations. Zhao Wei's silk shop opens precisely at the designated hour, with assistants arranging displays and preparing for the day's business. You wait until several other customers have entered before approaching, not wanting to appear too eager or desperate for attention. Today you're interested in silk suitable for winter robes, claiming that your previous purchase convinced you of the shop's quality. Zhao Wei greets you warmly, clearly pleased to see a potential customer returning for additional business. The conversation flows easily, covering topics related to silk production and seasonal demand. During the discussion, Zhao Wei mentions recent difficulties with one of his suppliers, a producer in the southern provinces who's been affected by irregular weather patterns. The conversation reveals details about his supply chain, including relationships with transporters and arrangements for moving goods during challenging conditions. You listen carefully while examining various silk options, gathering information that might reveal patterns of trade that don't appear in official records. Zhao Wei's casual comments suggest a level of operational flexibility that could indicate unofficial arrangements, designed to avoid customs inspections or duty payments. The brown dog waits patiently outside, having established a routine of accompanying you to various locations while understanding which establishments welcome animals and which don't. When you emerge from the silk shop, it greets you with a kind of enthusiasm that suggests your return was never in doubt. You spend the afternoon visiting other businesses in the commercial district, gradually building a mental map of the relationships between various traders and merchants. The tea dealer knows Zhao Wei well, often recommending customers who might be interested in silk to complement their tea purchases. The money changer handles transactions for multiple businesses, including some that deal with currencies from regions that don't appear on standard trade routes. Each conversation provides small pieces of information that might become significant when assembled into a complete picture. Nothing dramatic or obviously illegal, just the kind of operational details that suggest business practices worth investigating more thoroughly. The wine shop where you spend your evenings has become a regular refuge, a place where you can organize your thoughts and plan the next day's activities. The brown dog has established its own routine, exploring the area around the shop while you drink, but always returning when it's time to head home. Your reports to the magistrate's office are becoming more detailed and potentially more valuable. Instead of simple conversations overheard in taverns, you are providing information about specific business practices and trade, relationships that might reveal systematic violations of imperial regulations. The clerk who receives your reports seems pleased with the quality of intelligence you're providing. The payments are larger now, reflecting the increased complexity of your assignment and the potential value of the information you're gathering. Enough money to maintain decent clothes and drink acceptable wine, sufficient to support the kind of lifestyle that allows continued access to Zhao Wei's establishment. But with the increased payments comes increased expectation, and you're beginning to understand that your role in the imperial surveillance system has evolved beyond simple informant. You're now conducting targeted investigation of specific individuals, gathering evidence that might be used to support formal charges or justify closer government scrutiny. The realization brings a kind of cold clarity about what you've become. Not just a drunk trading gossip for wine money, but an active participant in a system that monitors and controls the lives of ordinary people trying to make honest livings. The guilt is different now, more specific and harder to ignore. Yet the alternative to cooperation is a return to the desperate existence you barely survived before this assignment. No money, no purpose, no human contact beyond the casual cruelty of people who've written you off as hopeless. The brown dog's loyalty is comforting, but it can't provide the basic necessities that keep you alive and functional. You wake to find the brown dog has brought you a present. A dead rat, placed carefully beside your head like an offering to a deity who's fallen on hard times. The rat is fresh, probably caught during the night while you slept off yesterday's wine. The dog sits nearby, tail wagging slightly, clearly proud of its contribution to your household. You push the rat away with a stick and stumble outside to relieve yourself. The morning air carries the smell of cooking rice from nearby houses, families preparing breakfast, while you contemplate whether dead rats count as food when you're this desperate. The brown dog retrieves its gift and settles down to eat, apparently less concerned about culinary standards than you are. Your hands are shaking again, which means you need wine before attempting any surveillance work. The trembling makes it difficult to appear respectable, and today's visit to Zhao Wei's shop requires the kind of steady demeanor that inspires confidence in potential business relationships. The public well is busier this morning, with servants filling water jars for their employers' households. You wait your turn, listening to gossip about various neighborhood events. a merchant's wife who's been seen visiting a fortune teller too frequently, a scholar who's been receiving mysterious letters from contacts in distant provinces, the kind of casual intelligence that might interest someone in the magistrate's office. The water is cold enough to shock you into full alertness, washing away some of the wine smell and general griminess that accumulates during sleepless nights. You attempt to smooth your hair and straighten your clothes, trying to achieve the kind of presentation that won't immediately mark you as desperate. A woman washing vegetables recognizes you from your previous life, when you had a family and regular employment. She nods politely, but doesn't speak, the way people acknowledge former neighbors who've experienced traumatic social decline. Her silence is more painful than outright hostility would be. The brown dog finishes its breakfast and follows you toward the commercial district, maintaining the loyal companionship that's become the most stable relationship in your current existence. It seems to understand your daily routine now, knowing which buildings to wait outside and which routes lead to establishments that provide wine. Zhao Wei's silk shop is preparing for what appears to be a busy day. Several bolts of particularly fine silk are being displayed prominently, suggesting the arrival of new inventory that warrants special attention. You observe from across the street, noting which customers examine the new merchandise and how the staff handles transactions involving expensive items. A well-dressed official enters the shop, clearly someone with significant purchasing power and specific requirements. His conversation with Zhao Wei appears animated, involving detailed examination of multiple fabric options. The interaction lasts longer than typical customer visits, suggesting either very particular needs or possibly discussions that go beyond simple commercial transactions. You wait until the official leaves before approaching the shop, timing your arrival to appear coincidental rather than calculated. Zhao Wei greets you warmly, pleased to see a returning customer on what's clearly shaping up to be a profitable morning. Today you're interested in silk suitable for formal occasions, explaining that your business prospects have improved enough to justify investment in proper attire. Zhao Wei nods approvingly, recognizing the logic of spending money on appearance when trying to establish commercial relationships. The conversation naturally turns to the new inventory, silks of exceptional quality that arrived recently from suppliers in the western provinces. Zhao Wei explains the special characteristics that justify the premium prices, demonstrating his expertise while revealing details about his sourcing relationships. During the discussion, he mentions the official who visited earlier, describing him as a regular customer with very specific requirements for formal court attire. The conversation reveals that Zhao Wei maintains relationships with government officials who trust his judgment about appropriate fabrics for various ceremonial occasions. This information feels significant, suggesting connections between Zhao Wei's business and imperial administration that might involve more than simple commercial transactions. Officials who trust particular merchants often develop relationships that include favors, information exchange, or arrangements that benefit both parties in ways that don't appear in official records. You examine several silk options while processing this intelligence, trying to appear genuinely interested in making purchases, while actually gathering information about business practices that might warrant investigation. Zhao Wei's casual mentions of special arrangements for valued customers suggest flexibility in normal procedures. The brown dog waits outside with its usual patience, occasionally investigating interesting smells, but always returning to its post near the shop entrance. When you emerge, it greets you with the kind of enthusiasm that suggests your survival remains its primary concern. The afternoon provides opportunities to observe other businesses in the commercial district, building a more complete picture of the relationships between various merchants and their connections to imperial administration. The money changer handles transactions for several traders who seem to deal with officials regularly. The tea merchant mentions customers who purchase expensive varieties for gifts to government supervisors. Each observation adds detail to your understanding of how commerce and administration intersect in ways that might create opportunities for corruption or regulatory avoidance. Nothing dramatically illegal, but patterns of relationship that could warrant closer scrutiny from imperial investigators. Your evening wine tastes better when you can afford decent quality, but the improved circumstances don't eliminate the underlying guilt about what you're doing. Every conversation with Zhao Wei feels like a betrayal of someone who's treated you with courtesy and respect, even though he doesn't know your real purpose. The brown dog settles beside you as you drink, providing companionship that doesn't require justification or explanation. Its presence reminds you that loyalty exists even in circumstances where humans have given up on each other. A small comfort in a situation that's becoming increasingly morally complicated. Sleep comes fitfully, interrupted by dreams that mix surveillance work with memories of your previous life. Your wife's voice explaining why she can't stay married to someone who chooses wine over family responsibility. Your children asking questions about their father's work that you can't answer honestly. Zhao Wei's friendly greeting mixing with images of imperial investigators examining his business records. Morning brings the familiar cycle of physical discomfort and psychological preparation for another day of deception. The brown dog's greeting helps focus your attention on immediate necessities rather than abstract guilt about betraying people who trust you. Your hands require wine to achieve steadiness, but your mind needs clarity to navigate the complex social dynamics involved in effective surveillance. The balance between intoxication and functionality has become a precise calculation, calibrated to maintain appearances while gathering intelligence. The magistrate's office expects regular reports now, detailed assessments of Zhao Wei's business practices and potential connections to activities that might interest imperial investigators. Your observations are being compiled into a formal case file, building toward conclusions that could have serious consequences for someone who's treated you with consistent courtesy. Today's visit to the silk shop reveals new information about Zhao Wei's relationships with suppliers in frontier regions. He mentions recent correspondence with traders who've encountered unusual difficulties with customs inspections, suggesting knowledge of regulatory challenges that indicates direct involvement in shipping arrangements. The conversation also reveals his awareness of political developments in border provinces, information that suggests communication with sources who have access to military or administrative intelligence. Nothing obviously treasonous, but the kind of informed awareness that indicates connections to people with sensitive information. You purchase another small piece of silk, maintaining your cover as a gradually expanding customer, while gathering evidence that's building toward a comprehensive picture of potentially questionable activities. Zhao Wei seems pleased with your continued patronage, treating you as someone worth cultivating for future business opportunities. The brown dog greets your emergence from the shop with its usual enthusiasm, apparently satisfied that another successful reconnaissance mission has been completed. Together, you walk through the commercial district, an unlikely partnership between a desperate informant and a loyal mongrel who's chosen to share your disgrace. Your reports to the magistrate's office are becoming longer and more detailed, filled with specific observations that paint Zhao Wei as someone whose business practices warrant serious investigation. The clerk reads your submissions with obvious satisfaction, recognizing intelligence that might support formal charges or justify expanded surveillance. The payments reflect the increasing value of your work, providing enough money to maintain the kind of lifestyle that supports continued access to targets under investigation. Better clothes, acceptable wine, sufficient resources to appear respectable while conducting activities that feel increasingly dishonorable. But the money also represents deepening involvement in a system that uses human weakness to monitor and control the lives of ordinary people trying to achieve modest success. Every coin you receive connects you more firmly to activities that might destroy someone who's shown you nothing but courtesy and respect. The wine helps quiet these thoughts temporarily, but they return each morning, along with the physical symptoms that require more wine to manage. A cycle of dependency that mirrors your relationship with the imperial surveillance system, both sustained by needs that have become stronger than principles. The brown dog doesn't judge your moral compromises, providing loyalty and companionship without requiring explanations or justifications. Its presence reminds you that some relationships exist outside the networks of obligation and betrayal that define your interactions with humans. Tonight you sit in the wine shop with your reports completed and submitted, watching other customers who seem to have normal lives with normal problems. Merchants complaining about seasonal fluctuations in demand. Scholars discussing philosophical questions that don't involve monitoring their neighbors. People whose worst moral compromises probably involve minor dishonesty about household expenses. The brown dog sleeps under your table, confident that you'll provide whatever protection and resources you can manage. Its trust feels heavier than the gold coins you receive for betraying people who've treated you kindly. A reminder that some loyalties should matter more than survival, even when survival requires abandoning everything that once made life worth living. You finish your wine and head home through streets that feel different now that you know how the imperial surveillance system monitors the lives of ordinary citizens. Every casual conversation might be overheard by someone who trades information for survival. Every business transaction might be observed by eyes that report to people who make decisions about other people's futures. The brown dog follows faithfully, providing the kind of companionship that doesn't require moral justification. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to gather intelligence about people who trust you, new chances to trade human dignity for the basic necessities that keep you alive and functional. But tonight, there's just the simple comfort of a loyal mongrel who's chosen to share your disgrace, and the temporary peace that comes from having enough wine to quiet the voices that remind you what you've become. The brown dog wakes you by dropping something wet on your chest. Not another rat this time, but a fish head that smells like it's been dead for several days. The dog sits back and watches your reaction, apparently expecting gratitude for this latest contribution to your household economy. You push the fish head away and immediately regret the movement. Your head feels like someone filled it with sand and then shook it vigorously. The wine you drank last night was stronger than usual, or maybe you just drank more of it than you realized. Either way, the brown dog's enthusiastic face-licking isn't helping your condition. Outside, the morning sounds of Chang'an muffled by a persistent ringing in your ears. Servants calling to each other across courtyards, merchants arranging their displays, the general bustle of people who have purposes beyond surviving until the next drink. You lean against the wall and wait for the world to stop tilting sideways. The brown dog retrieves its fish head and settles down to eat, making wet, crunching sounds that turn your stomach. You've reached the point where watching a dog eat garbage makes you nauseous, which suggests your relationship with alcohol has progressed beyond simple dependency into something more medically concerning. Your hands aren't just shaking today. They're trembling with a fine, constant motion that makes simple tasks like tying your shoes nearly impossible. You need wine, but you also need to appear functional enough to continue your surveillance work. The balance between these requirements is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The public well seems farther away than usual, and the walk leaves you breathing heavily. Several people notice your condition, but they look away quickly, the way citizens avoid acknowledging unpleasant realities about their neighbors. You're becoming the kind of person others cross the street to avoid. The water is shockingly cold against your face, but it helps clear some of the fog from your mind. You can't eliminate the trembling or the nausea, but you can achieve enough clarity to remember what you're supposed to do today. Visit Zhao Wei's shop. Observe his business practices. Gather intelligence for people who compile evidence against successful merchants. A woman at the well moves away when you approach, gathering her water jars and leaving without the usual courteous nods that neighbors exchange. Your decline has progressed beyond social awkwardness into something that actively disturbs other people. You're becoming a walking reminder of how quickly respectable lives can collapse. The brown dog seems unaffected by your deteriorating condition, maintaining its loyal companionship, regardless of your increasing resemblance to the kind of person who talks to animals, because humans have stopped listening. It follows you toward the commercial district, apparently confident that today will bring new adventures worth sharing. Zhao Wei's silk shop is busy when you arrive, filled with customers examining fabrics and negotiating prices. You observe from across the street, noting that your hands are shaking too visibly to attempt normal social interaction. Today's surveillance will require a different approach. A tea shop next to the silk merchant provides a better vantage point, with tables positioned to observe activity in neighboring establishments. You order the cheapest tea available and try to appear like a customer taking a break rather than someone conducting surveillance, while fighting off withdrawal symptoms. The tea tastes like hot water flavored with dust, but it's warm and gives you something to hold that might disguise the trembling in your hands. From this position, you can observe customers entering and leaving Zhao Wei's shop, noting patterns of activity that might reveal information about his business practices. A group of well-dressed men enters the silk shop together, clearly conducting some form of organized business rather than individual shopping. Their conversation appears serious, involving detailed examination of specific fabrics and what looks like negotiation over quantities and prices, the kind of transaction that suggests bulk purchasing for particular purposes. You try to position yourself closer to the silk shop's entrance, but moving requires more coordination than you can currently manage. The tea shop owner notices your condition and approaches with the kind of stern expression that suggests he's dealt with problematic customers before. The conversation is brief and humiliating. You're asked to leave immediately, with suggestions about establishments that might be more appropriate for someone in your condition. The brown dog growls softly at the tea shop owner, apparently sensing your distress, but there's nothing either of you can do about the situation. Outside, you lean against a wall and try to steady yourself enough to continue surveillance work. The well-dressed men are still inside Zhao Wei's shop, their discussion appearing animated and potentially significant. But your current condition makes it impossible to gather intelligence that would be useful in formal reports. The brown dog sits beside you, providing the kind of non-judgmental support that you've forgotten how to expect from humans. Its presence reminds you that some relationships survive even dramatic personal deterioration, though the number of such relationships has been steadily declining. You need wine immediately, but you also need to maintain enough functionality to justify continued employment as an informant. The magistrate's office expects regular reports, and failure to provide useful intelligence could result in termination of your only source of income. The nearest wine shop is several streets away, but the walk might help restore some circulation to your extremities. The brown dog follows patiently, apparently understanding that today's activities will be different from your usual routine. The wine shop owner recognizes your condition immediately, providing a cup of rice wine without requiring payment in advance. He's seen enough desperate customers to understand that forcing someone in withdrawal to negotiate payment is often counterproductive for everyone involved. The wine burns going down, but within minutes, the trembling begins to subside and your vision clears enough to focus on immediate surroundings. You're not functional enough for detailed surveillance work, but you can at least walk without falling over and speak without your voice shaking. The brown dog waits while you drink, occasionally venturing outside to investigate interesting smells, but always returning to check on your condition. Its loyalty feels heavier today, a reminder that something depends on your survival, even when you're not sure why survival matters. After the second cup of wine, you feel steady enough to return to the commercial district and attempt some form of surveillance work. The well-dressed men have left Zhao Wei's shop, but there might be opportunities to observe other activities or gather information about the earlier transaction. Zhao Wei himself is visible through the shop's entrance, discussing something with his assistants that appears to involve inventory management. Bolts of silk are being moved and reorganized, suggesting that the morning's business involved significant changes to available stock. You approach the shop carefully, trying to appear like a customer despite your obvious physical condition. Zhao Wei notices your appearance immediately, expressing concern about your health with the kind of genuine kindness that makes your surveillance work feel particularly shameful. The conversation is awkward, with you attempting to maintain your cover while clearly struggling with symptoms that mark you as someone whose life has become unmanageable. Zhao Wei offers to help you find medical attention, apparently concerned that you might be seriously ill. His kindness feels like physical pain, a reminder of human decency that contrasts sharply with your current activities. You're being treated with compassion by someone you're investigating for the imperial government, someone whose trust you're betraying in exchange for wine money. You make excuses about temporary illness and leave quickly, unable to maintain the deception, while Zhao Wei looks at you with genuine concern. The brown dog follows, apparently sensing your distress, providing the kind of companionship that doesn't require explanations or justifications. The walk home passes in a blur of guilt and physical discomfort, with occasional stops to lean against walls when the world tilts too dramatically. The brown dog stays close, occasionally pressing against your leg when you stumble, providing whatever support a small mongrel can offer. Your sleeping place feels different now, more like a refuge from responsibilities you can't fulfill rather than temporary accommodation between surveillance activities. You settle onto the bamboo mat with the brown dog curled against your side, both of you exhausted by the day's limited accomplishments. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by dreams that mix surveillance work with memories of your previous life. Your wife's concerned voice, asking about your drinking, blending with Zhao Wei's offer to help find medical attention. Your children's confused faces mixing with images of imperial investigators examining evidence you've gathered. Morning arrives with the brown dog licking your face, apparently having decided that consciousness is preferable to whatever dreams have been troubling your sleep. Your condition is worse today, with trembling that extends beyond your hands to include your entire body. The magistrate's office expects a report, but you have nothing useful to provide. Yesterday's surveillance attempt was a complete failure, producing no intelligence worth including in official documents. Your deteriorating condition is making it impossible to perform the basic functions required for informant work. You struggle to the public well, supported by the brown dog's presence and your own desperate need to appear functional. The water helps temporarily, but the relief doesn't last long enough to support sustained surveillance activities. The wine shop provides temporary stability, but the cost is increasing as your tolerance builds and your physical condition deteriorates. The coins you receive for intelligence work are barely sufficient to maintain the level of intoxication required to function, creating a cycle of dependency that's becoming impossible to sustain. The brown dog watches your struggles with the kind of patient loyalty that suggests it's prepared to remain, regardless of how far your condition deteriorates. Its presence provides comfort, but also guilt about subjecting an innocent animal to the consequences of your choices. Your reports to the magistrate's office are becoming shorter and less detailed, reflecting your declining ability to gather useful intelligence. The clerk notices the deterioration in quality, making comments about the need to maintain professional standards, even under difficult circumstances. But the alternative to continued employment is immediate destitution, a return to the complete desperation you experienced before accepting informant work. The imperial surveillance system has created dependencies that make escape nearly impossible, trapping people like you in cycles of betrayal and self-destruction. Tonight you sit in your usual wine shop, trying to organize thoughts that refuse to stay organized. The brown dog sleeps under your table, occasionally stirring when other customers make loud noises, but generally maintaining the peaceful confidence that comes from trusting someone completely. Tomorrow will require another attempt at surveillance work, another effort to gather intelligence about people who've shown you kindness while you investigate them for the imperial government. The brown dog will follow loyally, providing whatever support it can while you continue activities that feel increasingly impossible to justify. The brown dog saves your life that night, though you don't realize it until morning. You wake up lying on your side instead of your back, with dog saliva dried on your face and the taste of vomit in your mouth. The brown dog sits nearby, watching you with the kind of alert attention that suggests it's been maintaining vigil while you were unconscious. Your clothes are soaked with sweat and something else that smells acidic and wrong. The bamboo mat beneath you is stained with fluids that your body expelled during the night, creating a mess that would be embarrassing if you still had enough dignity left to feel shame about bodily functions. The trembling has evolved into something more violent, muscle spasms that make coordinated movement nearly impossible. You try to sit up and immediately fall back down, your body refusing to cooperate with even simple commands. The brown dog moves closer, pressing its warm body against yours, apparently understanding that physical contact might provide some comfort. Your mouth feels like someone filled it with sand and old fish, but worse than the taste is the persistent nausea that makes swallowing difficult. You need water desperately, but the prospect of walking to the public, well, seems as challenging as climbing a mountain. The brown dog solves this problem by leaving and returning with a small clay bowl filled with water. How it managed this feat remains unclear, but the water tastes better than anything you've experienced in recent memory. The dog watches while you drink, tail wagging slightly when you manage to keep the liquid down. Outside, Chang'an continues its daily routine while you lie on a stained mat, fighting off symptoms that suggest your body is finally rebelling against months of systematic abuse. The sounds of normal life feel distant and irrelevant, separated from your current reality by the vast gulf between functional human beings and whatever you've become. The magistrate's office expects a report today, but you couldn't write coherent sentences if your life depended on it. Your hands shake too violently to hold a brush steady, and your thoughts refuse to organize themselves into the kind of structured intelligence that imperial clerks require. You attempt to stand and manage to achieve a sitting position before the world tilts sideways and forces you back down. The brown dog whines softly, apparently distressed by your condition, but uncertain how to provide more effective assistance. The nearest wine shop might as well be on the other side of the empire for all the good it does you. Walking that distance in your current condition would require strength and coordination that you simply don't possess. Yet without wine, the symptoms will only worsen, potentially progressing to the kind of medical emergency that attracts unwanted official attention. A solution presents itself in the form of voices outside your door, neighbors discussing the daily business of people whose lives haven't completely collapsed. You recognize one voice as belonging to a woman who operates a small food stall, someone who might be willing to perform a simple errand in exchange for payment. Calling out requires more effort than you expected, and your voice emerges as a hoarse croak that barely carries beyond your doorway. But the brown dog seems to understand your intent, barking sharply to attract the attention of people passing by. The conversation that follows is humiliating but necessary. You explain that you're too ill to leave your room, but need someone to purchase wine from the nearby shop. The woman agrees reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the transaction, but willing to help someone in obvious distress. The coins you give her represent your last official payment from the magistrate's office, money that was supposed to support surveillance activities that you're no longer capable of performing. But immediate survival takes precedence over future employment prospects, especially when your current condition suggests that future prospects might be measured in days rather than months. The brown dog maintains its vigil while you wait, occasionally leaving to check on the woman's progress, but always returning to provide whatever comfort its presence can offer. Its loyalty feels more valuable than human friendship, partly because it's freely given without expectation of reciprocal benefit. When the woman returns with wine, the relief is immediate and overwhelming. The first cup quiets the violent trembling enough to allow coordinated movement. The second cup clears your vision and restores basic cognitive function. By the third cup, you feel almost human again, though human now represents a much lower standard than it once did. The brown dog seems pleased by your improvement, tail wagging as you achieve the milestone of sitting upright without assistance. Small victories matter more when your baseline condition has deteriorated to the point where consciousness itself feels like an accomplishment. But the wine also brings clarity about your situation, and clarity reveals problems that intoxication had been obscuring. You've used your last official payment to purchase immediate relief from withdrawal symptoms, leaving you without resources to maintain the level of functionality required for continued surveillance work. The Imperial surveillance system has no patience for informants who can't perform their duties, and your declining condition makes it unlikely that you'll be able to gather useful intelligence in the immediate future. The choice between seeking medical attention and maintaining your cover as a functioning informant has become impossible to avoid. Medical attention in Imperial China, for someone in your condition, involves treatments that are often worse than the underlying problem. Physicians who understand alcohol dependency as a moral failing rather than a medical condition, remedies that involve painful purging procedures designed to eliminate corrupted humors from your system. The kind of cure that frequently results in death from the treatment rather than the disease. The alternative is attempting to maintain your surveillance duties while managing symptoms that make normal social interaction nearly impossible. Continuing to investigate Zhao Wei while your hands shake too violently to examine silk properly. Gathering intelligence while your speech slurs and your behavior marks you as someone whose testimony might not be reliable. You spend the afternoon trying to organize your thoughts into something resembling a coherent report for the magistrate's office. The effort produces a brief, poorly written document that describes recent observations of Zhao Wei's business activities without providing the kind of detailed analysis that Imperial investigators expect. The brown dog watches your struggles with writing, occasionally pressing against your leg when frustration makes you want to abandon the task entirely. Its presence provides motivation to continue efforts that feel increasingly pointless, reminding you that something still depends on your survival. Evening brings the familiar cycle of drinking enough wine to achieve temporary stability while avoiding the level of intoxication that would make tomorrow's challenges impossible to meet. The balance has become increasingly precise, requiring careful attention to quantities and timing. That would impress physicians if they could observe the process objectively. The brown dog settles beside you as darkness falls, providing warmth and companionship that doesn't require explanations about why your life has taken this particular trajectory. Its breathing helps regulate your own, creating a rhythm that makes sleep more achievable despite the ongoing physical discomfort. Your dreams mix surveillance activities with memories of your previous life, creating confused narratives where Zhao Wei discusses silk prices with your former wife, while Imperial investigators examine your children's school records. The boundaries between past and present blur in ways that suggest your mind is processing trauma through alcohol-induced confusion. Morning arrives with the brown dog performing its usual wake-up routine, but today you're grateful for the interruption. The dreams were becoming increasingly disturbing, blending guilt about your current activities with regret about choices that destroyed your family. Your physical condition has stabilized somewhat, though stabilized means you can stand without falling down rather than feeling genuinely healthy. The trembling continues but within manageable limits, and your vision clears enough to navigate familiar routes without assistance. The magistrate's office receives your report with obvious disappointment, noting the decline in quality and detail compared to your previous submissions. The clerk suggests that maintaining professional standards is essential for continued employment, a polite warning that your position as an informant is becoming precarious. But they also provide another assignment, recognition that even unreliable intelligence is preferable to no intelligence at all. This time, the target is a money changer who's suspected of facilitating transactions that avoid imperial taxation. Someone whose business practices might reveal patterns of financial irregularity that warrant investigation. The advance payment is smaller than usual, reflecting diminished confidence in your ability to produce useful results. Enough for basic necessities, but not sufficient to maintain the kind of lifestyle that supports effective surveillance work. A reminder that your value to the imperial system is declining along with your physical condition. You leave the magistrate's office with mixed feelings about receiving continued employment despite your obvious deterioration. The work provides essential income, but it also requires activities that become more morally troubling as your targets show you kindness, while you investigate them for the government. The brown dog greets your emergence with its usual enthusiasm, apparently pleased that another day of shared survival has begun. Together, you walk through Chang'an's commercial district, an unlikely partnership between a failing informant and a loyal mongrel who's chosen to share whatever fate awaits you both. The money changer's establishment is located in a busy section of the commercial district, surrounded by other businesses that handle various forms of financial transaction. Observing his activities will require positioning yourself where you can see customers and transactions without appearing to conduct surveillance. But today, your condition makes subtle observation impossible. Your hands shake too visibly, your speech slurs too noticeably, and your general appearance marks you as someone whose presence in financial establishments might attract unwanted attention from legitimate customers. You settle for observing from a distance, noting patterns of customer activity that might reveal information about the money changer's business practices. The brown dog sits beside you, providing companionship that doesn't require justification or explanation, while you attempt work that feels increasingly impossible to perform effectively. Tonight you'll drink enough wine to quiet the symptoms temporarily, write another inadequate report for Imperial investigators, and try to sleep despite dreams that mix surveillance work with guilt about betraying people who've treated you with undeserved kindness. The brown dog will maintain its loyal vigil, providing whatever comfort a small mongrel can offer while you continue activities that feel increasingly difficult to justify, but impossible to abandon. The brown dog finds you 3 days later, unconscious in an alley behind the wine shop, where you'd been attempting to trade your last possession for alcohol. Your father's jade pendant, the final remnant of your family's respectability, lies in the dirt beside you, along with the contents of your stomach. When you regain consciousness, the dog is licking your face with the kind of determined persistence that suggests it's been trying to wake you for some time. Your clothes are soaked with rain that fell while you were unconscious, and your body temperature has dropped low enough that shivering has become involuntary and constant. The wine shop owner finds you both there in the morning, the brown dog refusing to leave your side, despite the obvious fact that you're no longer capable of providing food or shelter. He looks at you with the weary resignation of someone who's seen too many similar situations, then helps you sit up against the alley wall. Your father's pendant is gone, though you have no memory of what you received in exchange for it. Probably a few cups of wine that provided temporary relief before your body rejected them, along with whatever dignity you had remaining. The brown dog sits close enough to share body heat, apparently understanding that warmth is now a scarce resource. The wine shop owner brings weak tea and suggests that you might want to consider seeking help from the Buddhist monastery outside the city walls. Monks who specialize in caring for people whose lives have become unmanageable, though their methods involve giving up alcohol entirely rather than managing consumption at sustainable levels. The prospect of complete sobriety terrifies you more than death, partly because withdrawal without medical supervision might actually result in death, but mostly because alcohol has become the only reliable relationship in your life. The brown dog provides loyalty, but it can't eliminate the physical symptoms that make existence unbearable without chemical assistance. You attempt to stand and discover that your legs no longer support your weight reliably. The brown dog positions itself to provide stability, pressing against your side with the kind of intuitive understanding that suggests it's learned to anticipate your physical limitations. The walk to the magistrate's office requires frequent stops to rest against walls and recover from exertion that would have been trivial when you were healthy. Other pedestrians avoid you now, crossing streets to maintain distance from someone whose condition makes them uncomfortable about the fragility of their own circumstances. The clerk at the magistrate's office takes one look at your appearance and suggests that your services might no longer be required. Your recent reports have been inadequate, your surveillance work ineffective, and your physical condition has deteriorated beyond the point where you can function as a reliable informant. The conversation is brief and final. No dramatic confrontation, just the quiet termination of someone who's become more liability than asset. Your position in the Imperial surveillance system has been eliminated, along with your only source of legitimate income. Outside the magistrate's office, you sit on the steps with the brown dog and try to process what unemployment means when you have no family, no friends, no possessions, and no skills beyond gathering intelligence about your neighbors. The dog seems unconcerned about these developments, apparently confident that you'll find some way to continue existing. The Buddhist monastery is several li outside Chang'an's walls, a distance that would require most of a day to cover in your current condition. The brown dog would probably follow, but subjecting it to whatever treatment the monks provide for alcoholics seems unfair to an animal that's shown you nothing but loyalty. You spend the afternoon in a public park where beggars are tolerated as long as they don't disturb other visitors. The brown dog explores the area while you rest against a tree, both of you adjusting to unemployment and the prospect of complete destitution. A group of children playing nearby notice the brown dog and attempt to entice it away with scraps of food. The dog accepts their offerings, but returns to your side immediately afterward, apparently understanding that loyalty involves more than following whoever provides the most food. As evening approaches, you realize that you have no plan for tonight, beyond hoping that unconsciousness will arrive before the withdrawal symptoms become unbearable. The brown dog seems to sense your despair, pressing closer and maintaining the kind of faithful presence that you've long since stopped deserving. A merchant passing through the park recognizes you from your surveillance work, though he doesn't understand the nature of your previous employment. He remembers you as someone who seemed interested in commercial activities, possibly a fellow trader experiencing temporary difficulties. The conversation that follows is awkward but potentially significant. The merchant mentions that he's looking for someone to help with basic tasks around his warehouse. Work that doesn't require specialized skills, but does need someone reliable enough to show up regularly. You explain that your reliability might be questionable due to ongoing health problems, but the merchant seems willing to take a chance on someone who's clearly desperate for employment. The pay is minimal, barely enough for basic necessities, but it represents an alternative to complete destitution. The brown dog watches this conversation with alert interest, apparently understanding that important decisions are being made about your shared future. When you stand to follow the merchant toward his warehouse, the dog falls into step beside you with the confidence of someone who's prepared for whatever comes next. The warehouse is smaller than you expected, filled with goods awaiting distribution to retailers throughout Chang'an. Tea, silk, pottery, and various imported items that represent the commercial networks connecting the imperial capital to distant provinces. Simple work involving sorting, organizing, and basic record-keeping. Your hands shake too much for detailed writing, but you can perform basic manual labor as long as the tasks don't require precise coordination. The merchant seems satisfied with your willingness to work, though he makes it clear that continued employment depends on showing up consistently and avoiding behavior that disrupts warehouse operations. The brown dog settles in a corner of the warehouse, apparently deciding that this represents acceptable accommodation for both of you. The merchant doesn't object to its presence, perhaps recognizing that people in your condition often depend on animals for the kind of companionship that humans no longer provide. That night, you sleep on a pile of rice sacks in the warehouse, with the brown dog curled against your side, providing warmth and the comfort of not being completely alone. Your dreams are less troubled than usual, possibly because physical exhaustion overrides the psychological symptoms that normally disturb your rest. Morning brings the familiar cycle of withdrawal symptoms, but also the necessity of appearing functional enough to perform warehouse duties. The merchant provides weak tea and expresses hope that regular work might help improve your overall condition. The tasks are simple enough that you can accomplish them despite trembling hands and occasional dizziness. Sorting goods according to destination, organizing inventory by type and quality, maintaining basic records of items received and distributed. Work that provides structure to days that had become formless cycles of seeking alcohol and avoiding complete collapse. The brown dog establishes its own routine within the warehouse environment, exploring the various storage areas while staying close enough to monitor your condition and provide assistance when needed. Its presence makes the work more bearable, reminding you that something still depends on your continued existence. Over the following weeks, you develop a precarious stability based on minimal alcohol consumption and maximum physical activity. Not sobriety, which remains impossible given your physical dependence, but a kind of managed decline that allows basic functionality while acknowledging the realities of your condition. The merchant seems pleased with your work, though he occasionally expresses concern about your health and suggests that you might benefit from medical attention. These conversations are kind, but impossible to follow through on, since medical treatment would require admitting the extent of your alcohol dependency. The brown dog thrives in the warehouse environment, apparently enjoying the variety of smells and textures that accompany commercial goods from across the empire. It's gained weight and energy, developing the kind of confident bearing that comes from having a secure home and reliable companionship. Your former life as an imperial informant feels increasingly distant, like something that happened to a different person in circumstances you can barely remember. The guilt about betraying people like Zhao Wei remains, but it's overshadowed by the immediate challenges of maintaining basic survival while managing a medical condition that could prove fatal if handled incorrectly. Sometimes you wonder what happened to the intelligence you gathered, whether your reports contributed to investigations that affected the lives of people who treated you with undeserved kindness. But these thoughts lead nowhere productive, and the brown dog seems to sense when your mood darkens, providing distraction through its own cheerful engagement with daily activities. Tonight you sit in the warehouse with your loyal companion, listening to the sounds of Chang'an settling into evening routine. Normal people conducting normal lives, while you and the brown dog share the simple satisfaction of having survived another day without losing everything completely. Tomorrow will bring more warehouse work, more careful management of alcohol consumption, and more opportunities to appreciate the loyalty of a mongrel dog who chose to share your disgrace rather than seeking more promising companionship. Small victories in circumstances that could have been much worse, and still might be if your condition deteriorates beyond the point where basic functionality becomes impossible. But for now, there's warmth, shelter, and the steady breathing of a faithful friend who asks nothing more than the chance to remain by your side while you both navigate whatever challenges the Empire might present to people who've fallen as far as it's possible to fall while still being technically alive. The brown dog stretches against your leg and settles into sleep, apparently confident that the tomorrow will bring new adventures worth sharing. Its trust feels heavier than the jade pendant you traded for temporary relief, a reminder that some relationships survive even the complete collapse of everything else that once seemed permanent. Sleep comes easier in the warehouse, surrounded by the honest smells of commerce and the comforting presence of an animal who's chosen loyalty over self-preservation. Your dreams tonight are quieter, filled with simple images of sorting goods and organizing inventory rather than the complex guilt that characterized your surveillance work. And so you sleep, accompanied by a brown dog whose snoring provides the kind of peaceful soundtrack that you'd forgotten was possible, in a place where your past doesn't matter as much as your willingness to show up tomorrow and continue the basic work of existing. The brown dog dies on a Tuesday morning in spring, curled against your side as the warehouse fills with the first light filtering through dusty windows. You wake to find its body still warm, but motionless, eyes closed peacefully, as if it simply decided that sleep was preferable to consciousness. You sit with the dog's body for a long time, stroking fur that no longer responds to your touch. The warehouse is quiet except for the distant sounds of Chang'an, beginning another day of commerce and administration, normal activities continuing while your only reliable relationship ends without ceremony or explanation. The merchant finds you there several hours later, still holding the small brown body that represented the closest thing to family you've had since your wife left. He doesn't say much, just helps you wrap the dog in clean cloth and carries it outside where such things can be handled properly. You dig a grave behind the warehouse, in a small patch of earth where weeds grow between storage buildings. The work is difficult with hands that shake constantly, but it provides something to do with grief that feels too large for the simple fact of a mongrel's death. The brown dog is buried with the cloth wrapped carefully around its body, along with a small piece of dried fish that it never got to eat. You mark the spot with a flat stone, though you know that nothing will remain of this small ceremony, beyond your own memory of loyalty that lasted longer than most human relationships. That night, you drink more than you have in weeks, using coins saved from your warehouse wages to purchase wine that temporarily quiets the profound silence left by the absence of breathing beside you. The alcohol doesn't eliminate the grief, but it makes it manageable enough to avoid complete collapse. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by the habit of reaching for a warm body that's no longer there. The warehouse feels larger now, filled with empty spaces where the brown dog used to explore and investigate. You realize how much of your daily routine involved caring for something beyond yourself. Morning brings the familiar withdrawal symptoms, but also the necessity of continuing warehouse work, despite having lost the companionship that made daily survival bearable. The merchant expresses sympathy about the dog's death, but warehouse operations continue regardless of personal losses. You perform your duties mechanically, sorting goods and maintaining records with the kind of automatic precision that doesn't require emotional engagement. The work provides structure, but it no longer provides the satisfaction that came from sharing small accomplishments with a loyal companion. Over the following days, you begin to understand how much the brown dog's presence had been supporting your psychological stability. Without its cheerful companionship, the warehouse feels like a place where you exist rather than live, performing tasks that serve no purpose beyond delaying complete destitution. Your alcohol consumption increases gradually, partly to manage grief, but mostly to fill the empty spaces that the dog's loyalty used to occupy. The merchant notices your declining condition, but doesn't interfere, perhaps understanding that people in your circumstances have few options for managing loss. The grave behind the warehouse becomes a daily destination, a place where you can sit quietly and remember what it felt like to be responsible for something that depended on your survival. The conversations you have with the marked stone would seem pathetic to observers, but they provide the only relief from complete isolation. Spring progresses into summer, bringing heat that makes warehouse work more difficult and intensifying the smells of commerce that the brown dog used to investigate with such enthusiasm. You continue performing your duties, but the merchant begins making comments about your reliability and overall condition. Without the dog's presence to provide motivation for basic self-care, your hygiene deteriorates and your appearance becomes increasingly problematic for a business that serves respectable customers. The merchant suggests that you might benefit from medical attention, but you both know that such treatment is beyond your financial resources. Your former life as an imperial informant occasionally intrudes on thoughts that have become increasingly difficult to organize. You wonder whether Zhao Wei's business prospered despite the investigation you helped conduct, whether your reports contributed to official actions that affected innocent people's lives. But such concerns feel distant compared to the immediate challenge of managing each day without the companionship that had made survival feel worthwhile. The brown dog's death has revealed how much of your stability depended on relationships that existed outside the human systems that monitor and control ordinary lives. The Buddhist monastery outside Chang'an's walls begins to seem like a reasonable option, not because you want to achieve sobriety, but because monks who care for desperate people might understand what it means to lose the only relationship that provided unconditional loyalty. Yet leaving would mean abandoning the grave behind the warehouse, the small marked stone that represents the closest thing to family burial you're likely to achieve. The brown dog deserves better than to be forgotten along with everything else that made your life bearable. You continue working through the summer, maintaining minimal functionality while managing grief that proves more persistent than alcohol dependency. The warehouse provides shelter and basic income, but it no longer provides the sense of shared purpose that had made simple survival feel like an accomplishment. The merchant's patience wears thin as your condition affects warehouse operations, and you begin to understand that your employment is temporary, dependent on appearing functional enough to justify continued charity. Soon you'll need to find alternative arrangements or accept whatever consequences follow from complete destitution. But tonight you sit beside the brown dog's grave, sharing another cup of wine with a memory that listens without judgment. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new decisions about how to continue existing without the companionship that had made existence feel like something more than simply avoiding death. The marked stone catches moonlight, providing a focal point for conversations with someone who understood loyalty better than most humans. You tell the grave about warehouse activities, about your declining prospects, about the persistent guilt regarding people you betrayed while working as an imperial informant. And though only silence responds, the ritual of speaking to someone who knew your worst failures and remained faithful provides comfort that wine alone cannot supply. The brown dog's death ended the only unconditional relationship in your life, but it also preserved that relationship's memory from the corruption that might have followed from continued decline. Sleep comes eventually, aided by alcohol and exhaustion from grief that proves more demanding than physical labor. Your dreams mix memories of the brown dog with images of your lost family, creating confused narratives where loyalty and betrayal become impossible to distinguish. In the morning, you'll wake to another day of warehouse work, another effort to maintain basic functionality, while managing loss that feels too profound for someone whose life had been reduced to such simple elements. The brown dog's grave will remain behind the warehouse, marked by a stone that represents the closest thing to permanent meaning you're likely to achieve. And so you continue, one day at a time, carrying the memory of faithful companionship through circumstances that test whether survival is worth the effort required to maintain it. The brown dog believed it was, and perhaps that belief remains valid even after the believer has returned to the earth behind a warehouse in Chang'an. Tonight you drink to a mongrel's memory and try to sleep despite dreams that remind you what unconditional loyalty felt like when it was freely given rather than purchased with wine money from Imperial surveillance work. Tomorrow will test whether that memory provides sufficient motivation to continue the basic work of existing. The warehouse owner finds you 3 months later, collapsed beside the brown dog's grave on a cold morning when winter has settled over, Chang'an like a blanket that no one wants to pull away. Your body has finally surrendered to the combination of alcohol and grief and the simple exhaustion that comes from existing without purpose. The merchant calls for the neighborhood watch, who arrive to find you still breathing but unconscious, your hand resting on the flat stone that marks your only friend's resting place. They carry you to the Buddhist monastery outside the city walls, where monks who specialize in hopeless cases receive you without questions or judgment. Your withdrawal from alcohol nearly kills you, but somehow your body finds enough stubbornness to survive what feels like dying from the inside out. When consciousness returns after days of fevered unconsciousness, you find yourself in a small cell with clean straw bedding and a wooden bowl of rice gruel. A monk explains that you've been unconscious for a week, that your body fought a battle between survival and surrender that could have gone either way. Recovery comes slowly, measured in days when you can sit up without falling over, in weeks when you can walk to the monastery garden without assistance. The monks don't ask about your past or judge your failures. They simply provide the basic necessities required for continued existence, while your body remembers how to function without constant alcohol. The guilt about your surveillance work remains, but it feels different now, like something that happened to a different person in circumstances you can barely remember. The brown dog's memory provides more guidance than regret about betraying people whose names you're beginning to forget. You never leave the monastery, not because you achieve spiritual enlightenment or overcome your fundamental character flaws, but because there's nowhere else to go and nothing else to become. The monks allow you to tend their vegetable garden, simple work that requires no special skills beyond showing up consistently. Sometimes visitors to the monastery mention news from Chang'an, updates about merchants and officials whose lives continue, without reference to a former alcoholic who once gathered intelligence about their business practices. Zhao Wei's silk trade prospers. The money changer expanded his operations. Life moved forward without interruption from your investigations. On quiet evenings, you sit in the monastery garden and remember a small brown dog who chose loyalty over self-preservation, who shared your disgrace without complaint or judgment. The memory feels more valuable than anything you accomplished during years of official employment or surveillance work. The other monks eventually stop asking about your past, accepting you as someone whose presence requires no explanation beyond the simple fact that everyone needs somewhere to exist. You tend vegetables, maintain garden paths, and perform basic tasks that serve no purpose beyond keeping a small monastery functioning. Years pass without traumatic events or significant achievements. Your hands stop shaking. Your thoughts become clearer. The persistent nausea fades until you can eat rice gruel without feeling sick. Small improvements that suggest healing is possible, even for people who've fallen as far as circumstances allow. You never drink alcohol again, not from spiritual conviction, but because your body finally learned to function without chemical assistance. The brown dog's memory provides better comfort than wine ever did, reminding you that some relationships survive even complete personal collapse. And so you continue, one day at a time, tending vegetables in a monastery garden while Chang'an conducts its business of commerce and surveillance and imperial administration. Former informants become gardening monks. Former alcoholics learn to appreciate simple tasks performed without deception or betrayal. Tonight you sit in the garden, watching stars appear over mountains that surround the monastery, thinking about a loyal mongrel who understood friendship better than most humans. Tomorrow you'll tend vegetables and maintain paths and continue the basic work of existing peacefully in circumstances that no longer require betraying people who showed you kindness. Sleep comes easily now, untroubled by dreams of surveillance or guilt about intelligence work that feels increasingly distant from your current reality. The brown dog's memory provides the kind of peaceful companionship that doesn't require wine or deception or anything beyond simple gratitude for loyalty freely given. And in the morning, you'll wake to another day of garden work, another opportunity to remember what unconditional friendship felt like when it was offered by a small brown mongrel who chose to share your disgrace rather than seeking more promising companions. The brown dog's grave lies behind a warehouse in Chang'an, marked by a flat stone that probably no one visits anymore. But the memory of faithful companionship remains in a monastery garden where former alcoholics tend vegetables and try to sleep peacefully despite everything they've lost and everything they failed to become. So you sleep, finally, accompanied by the memory of a brown dog's loyalty and the simple satisfaction of work that requires nothing more than showing up tomorrow to continue the basic task of existing without causing additional harm to people who deserve better treatment than they received from imperial surveillance systems.